The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I signed the final consent form, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the 3 cups of coffee I'd downed trying to stay awake through the orientation. Subject number 247. That's who I became. The moment my pen left the paper, just another number in what they called a groundbreaking neuroscience study at Meridian Research Institute. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead researcher, had explained it all with practiced precision. Double-blind trial, cognitive enhancement compound, strictly controlled environment. But what caught my attention wasn't her methodical breakdown of protocols. It was the way her eyes lit up when she mentioned the preliminary results. There was something there, something she wasn't saying, hidden behind her professional demeanor. You understand, Mr. Walker, that you may be assigned to the control group, she'd asked, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. The placebo group receives no active compound. It's essential for validating our results, I nodded, already knowing I'd probably end up there. That's just my luck. James Walker, eternal background character in his own life story, always the control group, never the breakthrough, but the study paid well, and 3 weeks of observation beat to another month of scraping by on freelance technical writing. The first day was mind-numbingly boring. White walls, white coat, white pill. They placed me in a sparse but comfortable room with a bed, desk, and bathroom. No windows, just cameras in every corner and a tollway mirror that didn't even try to hide its purpose. The pill went down easy, a small, nondescript capsule that could have been anything from aspirin to sugar. How do you feel? Asked Dr. Chen's assistant, a lanky guy named Marcus, who couldn't have been more than 25. Like I just swallowed air, I replied, trying to inject some humor into the sterile atmosphere. He didn't laugh. The hours crawled by. They ran baseline tests, memory games, reaction time measurements, cognitive processing assessments. I kept waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Just the steady tick of the clock and the occasional scratch of Marcus's pen on his clipboard. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like an idiot for expecting anything different. Of course, I was in the control group. I could practically hear the universe laughing. But then came day 2. The headache started small, just a gentle throb behind my eyes. I dismissed it as caffeine withdrawal. They'd restricted us to 1 cup of coffee per day. By afternoon, though, it had evolved into something else entirely. Not pain exactly, but pressure, like my skull was slowly filling with static. During the daily cognitive tests, I noticed something odd. The sequences of numbers they showed me seemed to linger in the air, floating like ghostly afterimages. I blinked hard, attributed it to eye strain and too much time staring at screens. Any unusual sensations to report? Dr. Chen asked during the evening check-in, her pen poised above her notepad. I almost told her about the headache, about the strange visual effects, but then I saw something that made me hesitate. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw words forming in the air around her head. Please say no. Please say no. Please say no. I shook my head, both to clear it and to answer her question. Nothing unusual. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Was that relief I saw flicker across her face? That night the dreams began, not the usual abstract nonsense of normal dreams, but crystalline visions that felt more real than reality. I saw myself walking through the Institute's corridors, passing people I'd never met. A security guard with a small scar above his left eyebrow, a janitor humming an old Beatles song, a visiting researcher with mismatched socks. I woke up drenched in sweat, my head pounding with that same strange pressure. The room seemed different somehow, as if the walls had become semi-transparent. I could sense the people in neighboring rooms, their presence, their restlessness, their dreams. This wasn't right. I was in the control group, placebo, sugar pill, nothing more. But as I sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, watching shadows dance across the walls that shouldn't have had any shadows to cast, I knew something had gone terribly wrong, or terribly right. I wasn't sure which was more frightening. Day 3 was when everything I thought I knew about reality began to unravel, and somewhere in the building, behind layers of security and secrecy, I could feel Dr. Chen's mounting anxiety. She knew something about subject number 247 that wasn't in any of the official documentation. I just had to figure out what it was before the things I was beginning to see, to know, drove me completely mad, or worse, before they turned out to be real. The headache on day 2 wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. It started as a gentle pressure behind my eyes during the morning check-in, when Dr. Martinez was reviewing my baseline vitals. By noon, it had evolved into something else entirely, a strange pulsing sensation that seemed to ripple through my skull in perfect synchronization with the fluorescent lights overhead. I remember sitting in the sterile observation room, trying to focus on the cognitive assessment tests they'd given me. Simple pattern recognition, memory exercises, basic stuff. But the words kept swimming on the page, and that's when I first noticed something was different. The letters weren't just blurry. There were somehow more than letters. Each character seemed to carry in weight an emotional resonance I couldn't quite explain. "Are you experiencing any unusual symptoms?" Dr. Chen had asked, her pen hovering above her clipboard. Before she finished her sentence, I knew exactly what she was going to say, not in a vague, predictable way. I heard the words in my mind, in her precise accent. A full second before they left her lips, I dismissed it as coincidence. After all, I was in the control group, the placebo group. I'd watched them give me the pill that morning, a plain white capsule that was supposed to contain nothing but cellulose. I'd even joked about it with the research assistant, Sarah, asking if they at least made the sugar pills taste good. But as the afternoon wore on, the headache transformed again. It wasn't pain anymore. It was more like pressure, as if my brain was suddenly too big for my skull. The fluorescent lights began leaving trails in my vision, and the constant hum of the ventilation system started carrying whispers I couldn't quite make out. "I think something's wrong," I told Dr. Martinez during the evening assessment. He leaned forward, concerned, but I could feel something radiating from him. Not thoughts exactly, but intentions, worrying, curiosity, and underneath it all, a current of excitement that made my stomach turn. "What makes you say that?" he asked, but I was already answering the question he hadn't voiced yet, about whether I had eaten anything unusual or taken any other medications. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. and I watched his eyes widen slightly behind his wire-rimmed glasses. That night, alone in my monitoring room, I couldn't sleep. The headache had subsided, but something else had taken its place. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw patterns forming in the darkness, geometric shapes that seemed to carry meaning. Like a language I almost understood, the night nurse's footsteps in the hallway created ripples in my consciousness, each step carrying fragments of her thoughts. Worrying about her sick daughter, anticipation of her upcoming vacation, the subtle anxiety about a patient in room 204. I knew I should tell someone, report these symptoms, but there was something else growing inside me now. Curiosity. If this was happening to me on a placebo, what did it mean? What were the implications? And more importantly, why did I have the unsettling feeling that the researchers weren't nearly as surprised by these developments as they should have been? When Dr. Chen came to check on me the next morning, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition when I described the symptoms. She maintained her professional demeanor, but I could feel the turmoil beneath it. She was scared, not of me, but of something else. Something about the study itself. We'll need to run some additional tests, she said, trying to keep her voice neutral, but I could already see the tests in my mind. Brain scans, blood work, cognitive assessments I hadn't taken yet. I could see the results too, though they made no sense to me. Patterns of neural activity that shouldn't be possible, protein markers that shouldn't exist. That's when the first hallucination hit. The wall behind Dr. Chen seemed to ripple like water, and for a moment I saw through it, not just through the wall, but through time itself. I saw the room as it had been years ago, saw previous test subjects sitting where I sat now, saw their experiences overlaid with mine like transparent photographs stacked on top of each other. Are you all right? Dr. Chen asked, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. I wanted to tell her what I was seeing, but something held me back. A warning, perhaps, or an instinct I didn't yet understand. Instead, I nodded and forced a smile. Just tired, I lied, but we both knew it was more than that. As she left the room, I caught a glimpse of her thoughts, fragmented and chaotic, but clear enough to understand. She was going to make a phone call. Someone needed to be notified. Something about Protocol 7 and unexpected replication. I sat there, watching the walls breathe, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The placebo pill sat heavy in my memory. White, innocent, empty. But if it was truly empty, then what was happening to me? And why couldn't I shake the feeling that this was exactly what someone had been hoping would happen? The fluorescent lights in the observation room seemed different today. Not their usual sterile white, but somehow meaningful, like they were trying to tell me something through their subtle flickers. I'd been staring at them for hours, mapping patterns that shouldn't exist, while Dr. Harrison and her team whispered behind the one-way glass. I could hear them clearly now, not with my ears, but with something else, something new. Their thoughts leak through the barrier like smoke under a door, colored by their emotions, mostly fear tinged with fascination. They were scared of what was happening to me. Hell, I was scared too. Subject continues to demonstrate unprecedented sensitivity to environmental stimuli, Dr. Harrison murmured into her recorder. But before she'd even finished the sentence, I knew she would follow it with, possible psychological manifestation of double quotes dot 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 anticipatory response mechanisms. I completed out loud, my voice echoing in the empty room. Through the glass, I felt her pulse quicken. The headaches had evolved into something else entirely. What started as dull pressure behind my eyes had transformed into a sort of dot clarity, like someone had wiped clean a window I never knew was dirty. The world felt sharp, precise, as if I'd spent my whole life watching it through an autofocus lens. That morning, I dreamed of a woman in a blue cardigan. She had copper-colored hair and a small scar above her left eyebrow. In the dream, she told me her name was Claire Winters, and she was going to be my new nurse. 3 hours later, when the door opened and she walked in, exactly as I'd seen her, I didn't even flinch. I'd been expecting her. "Hello, Claire," I said before she could introduce herself. "The scar. Was it from a bicycle accident when you were 12? She dropped her clipboard. The researchers had doubled the frequency of their tests after that. Blood draws, cognitive assessments, brain scans, searching for any explanation of how placebo could be doing this. They kept showing me the capsule, still sealed in its sterile package. Just cellulose and sugar, nothing else. But something was happening. Something that defied their carefully controlled parameters and meticulous documentation. I could feel it growing stronger with each passing hour, like a muscle I never knew I had, slowly learning to flex. Dr. Harrison entered the room, her anxiety preceding her like a visible aura. "We need to discuss what happened this morning," she said, settling into the chair across from me. But I was already answering the question she hadn't asked yet, the dream about the plane crash. I said yes. I wrote down all the details: flight number, passenger manifest, expected departure time. You can verify it yourself. The flight hasn't taken off yet. Her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "That's not ... we can't possibly ... take it seriously." I finished for her. "But you already are. You've already called the airport, haven't you? Asked them to do an additional safety check on that specific aircraft." The color drained from her face because she had 3 hours ago, and there was no way I could have known that. "This isn't possible," she whispered, more to herself than to me. The capsule was empty. "We verified it ourselves multiple times." I leaned forward, studying the complex swirl of thoughts and emotions radiating from her mind. "Maybe that's exactly why it's working," I suggested. "Maybe the emptiness itself is the active ingredient, a void waiting to be filled with ... something else." She started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Wait," I said, my head tilting as I caught something new, something distant but approaching. "Someone's coming, someone important." I closed my eyes, letting the impression sharpen into focus. Dr. Marcus Chen, head of the research committee. He's in the elevator right now, 3rd floor, coming up. He's bringing results from the latest brain scan. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened. "How could you possibly ... double quotes." The door opened. Dr. Chen stood there, manila envelope in hand, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said. "The latest images, they're unlike anything we've ever seen." But I already knew what they showed. I'd seen them in my dreams last night, along with what they would find in tomorrow's scans and next week's. I'd seen what this was building toward, what I was becoming, and I knew why they were afraid. Because this was just the beginning. The placebo wasn't just working, it was evolving, adapting, using the very absence of an active compound to create space for something entirely new, something that shouldn't be possible. And as I sat there, watching Dr. Harrison's hands shake as she opened the envelope, I could feel it growing stronger, could feel the boundaries between minds becoming thinner, more permeable, could sense the thoughts of everyone in the building flowing through me like tributaries joining a river. They wanted answers, an explanation, something that would fit within their understanding of science and reality. But I was beginning to suspect that what was happening to me existed beyond the realm of their carefully controlled studies and double-blind trials. The truth was in the emptiness, in the void, in the space where something should have been, but wasn't, and that space was filling up with something else entirely. Day 7 arrived with a weight I couldn't shake. The fluorescent lights in my observation room seemed to pulse with an intelligence of their own, and I found myself avoiding direct eye contact with them, not out of fear, exactly, but something closer to respect, as if they were sentient observers in this increasingly bizarre experiment. Dr. Whitman entered that morning, clipboard in hand, her usual professional demeanor intact. But before she could speak, I recited her entire plan, conversation. You're going to ask about my sleep patterns, then about the recurring dream with the red door, and finally you'll mention that Dr. Chen wants to run additional EEG tests. The words fell from my mouth with a casualness that betrayed their impossibility. She dropped her clipboard. The clatter echoed through the room like a gunshot. That's exactly what I ... She steadied herself against a wall, her composure cracking for the first time since I'd met her. How long have you been able to do this? I wanted to tell her it wasn't just predictions anymore. That morning, I had experienced something far more unsettling. While lying in my bed, I had felt myself slip into other minds in the facility, not reading thoughts so much as becoming them. I had been the janitor mopping the 3rd floor, worrying about his daughter's college tuition. I had been the security guard at the front desk, counting minutes until his shift ended. I had been Dr. Chen in his office, staring at my test results with a mixture of fascination and terror. But I said none of this. Instead, I watched as the thoughts swirled around Dr. Whitman's head like visible whispers, her scientific skepticism battling with undeniable evidence, her fear of what this meant for the study's validity, her personal excitement at witnessing something that defied explanation. We need to talk about last night's dream, I said, knowing it would unsettle her further. The one about your sister Sarah and the accident when you were 12. The color drained from her face. I've never ... I've never told anyone here about Sarah, I know. But she wants you to know it wasn't your fault. The ice on the pond. No one could have known how thin it was. Dr. Whitman staggered backward toward the door, her hand clutching her throat. This isn't possible. You're in the control group. We verified the capsules ourselves. There's nothing in them, nothing. That's when the headache hit. Not like the previous ones, but something deeper, as if my brain was trying to expand beyond the confines of my skull. The lights flickered, and for a moment I saw everything. The entire facility laid out like a 3-dimensional blueprint in my mind. Every person, every thought, every hidden truth. There's something else, I managed to say through gritted teeth. "Something you're not telling me about the study, about why some of us were chosen for the control group." Dr. Whitman's thoughts betrayed her before she could speak. Images flashed through her mind. Previous trials, other facilities, patterns they'd noticed but never documented officially. The control groups consistently showing stronger effects than those receiving the actual compound. "We need to stop," she whispered. But I was already seeing more of the empty capsules, I said, the realization dawning. "They're not really empty, are they? Not in the way you think. You've been testing something else entirely, haven't you? Something you don't even understand." The lights in the room surge, burning and possibly bright. In that moment of brilliant clarity, I saw Dr. Whitman's face transform from fear to understanding. She knew I was right, even if she didn't know why or how. "The placebo effect," she said slowly. "We thought we were studying its limitations, but what if ... double quotes." She paused, her scientific mind struggling with the implications. "What if we accidentally created something else? What if the absence of an active compound created a space for something we never anticipated?" The headache intensified, and with it came a flood of information. Not just thoughts now, but possibilities, futures branching out like infinite fractals. I saw myself in dozens of potential timelines, each one shaped by the choices we were about to make. "Dr. Whitman," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind, "I need you to listen carefully. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 9:17 a.m., something is going to happen in Laboratory 6. Something that will change everything we think we know about consciousness, about reality itself." She reached for her phone, presumably to call for backup, but stopped when she saw my expression. "How can you be so sure?" "Because," I said, watching the future unfold in my mind with perfect clarity, "I've already lived it, and this time, we need to be ready." The lights flickered once more, and in that brief darkness I felt it, a presence vast and ancient, that had always been there, waiting in the spaces between thoughts and the vacuum of our expectations. We hadn't created anything new with our empty capsules. We had simply opened a door that had always existed, hidden in the architecture of human consciousness. And now something was coming through. The dreams became more frequent, more vivid, and increasingly impossible to dismiss. Each night, faces would emerge from the darkness, strangers whose lives would soon intersect with mine in ways that defied explanation. I started keeping a journal of these nocturnal visitations, documenting every detail, every name, every conversation I witnessed while sleeping. The weight of these prophecies was crushing me. Dr. Harrison called an emergency meeting after I correctly predicted the arrival of a new research assistant 3 days before she was even hired. I described her burgundy blazer, the small scar above her right eyebrow, and the way she would nervously adjust her glasses when introduced to the team. When Sarah Chen walked through those laboratory doors exactly as I had foreseen, the color drained from Harrison's face. "This is beyond a statistical probability," he muttered, furiously scribbling notes. "We need to expand the monitoring protocols. 24 observation, full neurological workup, blood panels every 6 hours. But I was tired of being their laboratory specimen. The constant observations, the endless tests, the probing questions, they were looking in all the wrong places. Whatever was happening to me wasn't something their instruments could measure or their charts could graph. It was fundamental, almost primordial, as if some ancient door in my mind had been quietly unlocked. That night in my dreams I saw Harrison in his office, late after everyone had gone home. He was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones about unexplained anomalies and potential security concerns. I watched as he pulled a red file from his bottom drawer, one I had never seen before, labeled Project Echo. When I described this scene to him the next morning, his hands began to shake. "That's impossible," he whispered. "That file doesn't exist." But we both knew I was right. The weight of unspoken truth hung heavy in the air between us. The other test subjects began avoiding me in the common areas. I couldn't blame them. Sometimes I would answer their questions before they asked them or mention details about their personal lives I couldn't possibly have known. It wasn't intentional. The information would just bubble up from some mysterious wellspring in my consciousness, like memories of a future that hadn't happened yet. One evening, as the sunset painted the observation room in shades of amber and gold, I had my most disturbing vision yet. I saw myself, but not as I was now. This version of me was different, changed in ways I couldn't quite articulate. There were others like me, dozens of them, all connected by an invisible thread of consciousness that transcended physical space. We were part of something larger, something that had been set in motion long before any of us swallowed those supposedly inert pills. When I opened my eyes, Dr. Chen was watching me intently. "You saw something, didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something about Project Echo." I nodded slowly, the fragments of the vision still swirling in my mind. "It's not just me, is it? There are others, previous trials, different facilities. You've seen this before." She glanced nervously at the security camera in the corner before. Leaning closer, "Listen carefully," she murmured. "Tomorrow morning, a man named Marcus Fletcher will arrive from the Oversight Committee. He'll want to transfer you to a different facility for specialized testing. Under no circumstances should the door burst open." And Dr. Harrison strode in, his face a mask of professional concern. "Sarah, you're needed in Lab 3. His tone left no room for argument. As she left, our eyes met briefly, and in that moment I saw her fear not just for me, but for herself. She knew something about the true nature of what was happening to us all. But before I could probe deeper into that fleeting connection, another vision slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I saw Marcus Fletcher. I saw the facility they wanted to take me to. I saw the others' failed experiments, successful transformations, and something else. Something they were building toward, a convergence, an awakening, a fundamental shift in human consciousness that would ripple through time itself. The placebo was never meant to be inactive. It was a key designed to unlock something that had always been there, dormant in our DNA. The empty capsules weren't empty at all. They were filled with potential, with possibility, with the power to breach the walls between now and then. Here and there, me and everyone else died as night fell over the research center. I sat alone in my room, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor. Tomorrow would bring Marcus Fletcher and his carefully crafted lies. Tomorrow would bring choices that would reshape not just my future, but the future of human evolution itself. I reached for my journal, its pages now filled with prophecies and possibilities, and began to write, not about what had happened, but about what would happen, about the truth hidden within Project Echo, about the others out there waiting to be awakened, about the choice I would have to make when morning came. The pen moved across the paper with urgent purpose, recording truths that hadn't yet come to pass. And somewhere, in the depths of my transformed consciousness, I felt them, the others, the awakened ones reaching back through time and space, trying to warn me about what was coming. But was I ready to hear their warning? Was I ready to face the full implications of what I had become? As I wrote the final words in my journal entry for that night, I realized that tomorrow would bring more than just Marcus Fletcher and his oversight committee. It would bring the moment when I would have to decide, remain a subject in their experiment, or become something they never intended, something beyond their control. The real question was no longer whether the placebo had worked. The question was, what had it awakened, and could it ever be put back to sleep? The final week of the trial arrived like a thunderclap of clarity. I'd stopped trying to convince the researchers of what was happening. They'd made their position clear. According to them, I was experiencing an unusually strong placebo response, nothing more. But I knew better. The empty capsules had unlocked something within me, something that defied their clinical explanations and statistical models. I began documenting everything meticulously, not in their sterile observation forms, but in my private journal. The dreams had become more vivid, more precise. I wasn't just seeing strangers anymore. I was living complete sequences of their lives, experiencing their most intimate moments, their deepest fears, their unrealized hopes. And when these people inevitably crossed my path days later, the recognition was mutual. Though they couldn't understand why, there was Sarah, the nurse who would join the research team on Thursday, whose daughter was fighting leukemia. I knew about the stuffed giraffe she kept in her locker, a gift from her little girl. When she walked into the observation room for the first time, I saw her hands trembling slightly, exactly as they had in my dream. Before she could introduce herself, I asked about Emily, her daughter. The color drained from her face. Dr. Matthews, the lead researcher, called an emergency meeting after that incident. I sat in the sterile conference room, surrounded by concerned faces and whispered conversations. They'd run additional tests on the capsules, mass spectrometry, chemical analysis, even radiation screening. Nothing, just pure cellulose, as they claimed all along. We're terminating the trial, Matthews announced, his voice carrying an edge of something I'd never heard before. Fear, fascination, the psychological implications of continuing could be ... I cut him off. You're afraid because you can't explain it, because it doesn't fit into your neat little boxes of cause and effect. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was tired of being treated like a case study rather than a person experiencing something extraordinary. That night, the most powerful dream yet came. I saw Dr. Matthews in his office, late at night, poring over old research papers from the 1960s, yellowed with age, bearing strange symbols and formulas. In the dream, he was connecting dots that had been scattered across decades of research. The placebo effect wasn't just about belief. It was about accessing something deeper, something hardwired into human consciousness. When I arrived at the facility the next morning for what was supposed to be my final observation, I found Dr. Matthews waiting for me. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, his typically immaculate lab coat wrinkled. Before I could speak, he held up a stack of papers, the exact ones from my dream. "You've seen these, haven't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "In your dreams?" I nodded, and for the first time since this began, I saw real belief in his eyes. "These papers," he continued, spreading them across the table, "they're from a classified research project called Mirrorgate. The scientists involved were studying something they called consciousness activation, the idea that human awareness could be expanded beyond normal limitations through specific triggers. They discovered that sometimes the trigger itself didn't matter. It was the expectation, the opening of the mind to possibility, that created the change." My heart was pounding as he spoke. Everything was falling into place. The empty capsules, the gradual awakening of abilities I couldn't explain, the increasingly accurate visions. "They shut the project down," Matthews went on, "because they couldn't control it. Once activated, the participants began developing abilities that went far beyond the study's parameters. Some could read thoughts, others could see future events. But what scared them most was that it seemed to be spreading, becoming contagious in a way. People close to the subjects started experiencing similar phenomena. I thought about Sarah, about how our eyes had met in that moment of recognition, about how she later confided that she'd been having strange dreams too, dreams about people she hadn't met yet. So what happens now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd seen this conversation in my dreams too. Matthews looked at me with a mixture of scientific curiosity and human concern. "We can't stop what's already been set in motion. The capsules, they were never the point. They were just a key that unlocked a door everyone has inside them. A door to capabilities we've always had but forgot how to access." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The question isn't what happens now. The question is, what are you going to do with this gift?" I closed my eyes, letting the weight of his words sink in. In my mind's eye, I could already see the ripples spreading outward, other people beginning to remember, to awaken, to see beyond the veil of ordinary perception. It wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. "I'm going to help others understand," I said finally, opening my eyes to meet his gaze. "Not everyone will be ready, but for those who are, this could change everything." Matthews nodded slowly, gathering up the old papers. "Just be careful," he warned. "Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again." As I left the facility for the last time, I felt different. Not just from when I'd first entered the trial, but from who I'd been my entire life. The empty capsules had indeed been a placebo, but they'd revealed a profound truth. Sometimes the most powerful changes come not from what we put into our bodies, but from what we unlock within our minds. In my pocket, I could feel the weight of my journal, filled now with not just records of what had happened, but visions of what was to come. The story wasn't ending, it was just beginning, and somewhere out there, others were starting to wake up too, their own doors slowly creaking open to possibilities they never knew existed. The researchers had been right about one thing. It was all in my head. They just hadn't understood just how vast and mysterious the human mind truly is. And as I stepped out into the bright morning sunlight, I could feel the future unfolding before me. Not just mine, but everyone's. The real experiment was just beginning.